Welcome back. The election race has been fraught with violence, incidents of corruption, accusations, and conspiracy theories involving both candidates and their supporting parties. The result, muddy waters that members of the public will have to wade through before they make their decision on the 26th of January. I spoke with Dr. Paikiasothy Saravanamuttu, head of the Centre for Policy Alternatives, to find out his view of the upcoming elections. Dr. Saravanamuttu, we have been expecting early elections before the end of the President's present term in office. What we weren't expecting was that it would become a competition between the President and the former Army Commander. How do you feel about the upcoming elections? Do you think it's what we as a country need right now?
Well, a couple of things. First and foremost, as you said, I think until the Fonseca candidacy, the election was seen very much as a walkover for the incumbent. The entrance of General Fonseca has created a contest. At the same time, however, I think there are those who feel that there isn't much of a difference between the two, in that over the last 3 to 4 years, the two of them have been part of the same regime and very key figures within that regime. However, at the same time, all available evidence seems to suggest that the Fonseca campaign's promise of change seems to be falling on fertile ground. It's having some sort of resonance as far as the electorate as a whole is concerned. This is a historic and very special election. For the first time, we have a candidate who doesn't have a party as such. This is the first post-war election, and in a sense, it is going to decide the future kind of political and constitutional architecture of the country. So it's a very important one. I personally would have preferred different choices within the election, but I think we have to deal with what we have, and therefore I think it's going to be a very important and decisive.
Now the war is behind us, but yet we seem to be reading of great betrayals and conspiracies in the news, and it appears that this patriot traitor label still holds currency amongst the people. What do you think will be the decisive factor in the upcoming elections?
Well, this is the thing, is that it's an election therefore framed very much by negatives. The betrayal, treachery argument is over an allegation with regard to war crimes. As to whether a war crime has been committed or not seems to be obscured by the heat of political debate rather than a search for the truth, peace, reconciliation, unity being given priority. At the end of the day, I think the election is going to be fought on broad brushstrokes, arguably even platitudes. The issue here, I think, is going to be the people's expectation of whether a Mahinda Rajapaksa second term is going to be worse than a Sarath Fonseca first term. Or put it differently, whether a Mahinda Rajapaksa second term is going to be better than a Sarath Fonseca first term.
But don't you find these broad brushstrokes problematic?
Oh yes, they are problematic insofar as the devil is very much in the detail. The opposition is an alliance. We do know that constituent elements of that alliance are at variance with each other, particularly when it comes to a very important dimension, economic policy. So these are questions, if you like, that are going to have to be resolved thereafter. I suppose what you have is a configuration of forces coming together for a specific purpose, that is the presidential election. As to whether this alliance will last beyond their presidential election, as to what will happen in the parliamentary elections, is left to be seen.
And what about the minority vote? What do you think, what impact could that have on the result?
I think the calculation has been that with the Fonseca candidacy creating a contest, that the singular vote will be more or less evenly split or very closely split, and therefore minority votes are going to be decisive. And you do have a situation in which, if you look at it in terms of parliamentary representation, you have the largest Tamil political group as well as the key Muslim political group on the side of the opposition. Now, I suppose both of them have done this as a leap of faith. They've done this very much in terms of seeing General Fonseca as a catalyst and instrument for change. And indeed, if you look at what has happened since the Fonseca candidacy, you've had the sort of decongestion of Manik Farm with regard to IDPs. You've had relaxations with regard to freedom of movement. You've got now the government moving with regard to high security zones. So this is all rather ironic. This is the government that seems to be responding to promises made by Fonseca.
Okay, but do you find that a positive thing in a way?
It is positive at this point, but I think we have still a far way to go, and in particular with regard to a political settlement, because I think, we are in a post-war situation. This election is also fundamentally about us moving to a post-conflict situation. And that's where I think the greatest challenge lies in terms of coming up with a political settlement, the necessary constitutional reform, and indeed development plans which take into account the needs and aspirations of the people in the areas in which this development is to be located.
The anti-Sarath Fonseca campaign is now insinuating that there has been a conspiracy, a secret agreement between the New Alliance the TN and the TNA. How do you think this will impact on the minority vote? Do you think it will at all?
Well, I don't think it'll impact that much on the minority vote. The issue here is the reason for bringing it out is because of this low attempt to frighten the singular majority into suggesting that there is some sort of secret deal and the country is really going to be divided. It's really sad that you always have this allegation brought out in every election. Is it going to be always the case that unless the mainstream political parties have the support of Tamil political parties, they will always question their bona fides and talk about secret deals and alikoti givusuma and all of that kind of thing? I suppose the opposition may well turn around and say, does the President and Karuna, do they have a secret agreement, and what is it?
The Muslim minority, given that thousands of North Muslims have still not had their problems resolved or addressed, in addition to other issues concerning them, how do you think their vote will sway?
Well, it looks like the SLMC seems to be having some sort of renaissance, as it were, as far as the East is concerned. And I think at the end of the day, the argument for change is one that is having a great deal of resonance with the minorities, and there is an anti-Rajapaksa regime vote as well. So the two combined will suggest that on the face of it at the present moment, a lot of the minority vote will go to the opposition.
So finally, what would you ideally like to see in the next few days leading up to the elections and thereafter?
What I would like to see is that A, there will be a reduction in violence. There will be no violence and malpractice on polling day. That will be as free a fair election as possible, and most importantly, that as many people who can will vote.